Before the world tour begins, Jimin secretly gives Jungkook a ring, and the reason behind it leaves Jungkook silently in tears. Jungkook's breath caught the moment. Jimin pressed the small silver ring into his trembling palm. "Don't say anything yet," Jimin whispered. The backstage hallway smelled like hairspray, warm stage lights, and the faint metallic scent of nervous sweat. Crew members hurried past them carrying cables and headsets, their footsteps echoing against the concrete floor, but inside the narrow shadow between equipment crates the world suddenly felt quiet, like a held breath before a storm. Jungkook stared at the ring resting in his hand. It wasn't flashy, just a thin band of silver with a tiny engraving on the inside. His chest tightened. "Hyung, what is this?" he asked softly. Jimin didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back against the cold wall, arms folded loosely, eyes lowered as if he were listening to the distant roar of the crowd gathering in the stadium above them. The muffled bass from soundcheck vibrated through the building like a slow heartbeat. The world tour would begin tonight. Months of preparation, flights across continents, millions of fans waiting. And somehow, Jimin had chosen this exact moment to give him a ring. Jungkook's fingers curled instinctively around it. "Is this a joke?" he asked, though his voice lacked any real laughter. Jimin finally looked up. His expression was calm, but Jungkook knew him too well. Behind that calmness lived something deeper, something fragile. "You remember the trainee dorm?" Jimin asked. The question was so unexpected Jungkook blinked. "Of course I do. How cold it used to get in winter," Jimin continued. Jungkook nodded slowly. The heater barely worked. Jimin smiled faintly. "You used to steal all the blankets." "I did not." "You absolutely did," Jimin said, and the warmth in his voice carried a memory with it. "You'd pretend to be asleep so nobody would take them back." Jungkook looked down at the ring again. "What does that have to do with this?" Jimin exhaled through his nose, almost like he was steadying himself. "Back then, you told me something." Jungkook frowned. "I told you a lot of things." "No," Jimin said quietly, "this one was different." The hallway lights flickered slightly as another surge of sound rolled through the building. Somewhere above them, thousands of fans were chanting. Jungkook could feel the vibration in his bones. Jimin pushed himself off the wall and stepped closer. "When you were 15, he said softly, "you told me you were scared you'd lose yourself one day." Jungkook's throat tightened. The memory returned like a faded photograph. A small dorm room, a thin mattress, snow falling outside the window, his younger self staring at the ceiling while whispering fears he barely understood. "You said," Jimin continued, "that if everything became too big, the fame, the pressure, you might forget who you were." Jungkook's hand slowly closed around the ring. "I was a kid," he murmured. "Exactly." Jimin's voice dropped even softer. "And kids tell the truth before they learn how to hide it." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the stadium swelled again, like an ocean pressing against the walls. Jungkook swallowed. "So this ring is supposed to remind me who I am?" he asked. "Partly." Jimin reached forward and gently turned Jungkook's hand over, opening his fingers. The silver band glinted under the fluorescent light. "Look inside." Jungkook tilted it. There was an engraving. 2 simple words. "Stay you." His vision blurred instantly. The phrase hit him harder than he expected, like a sudden crack through armor he didn't realize he'd built. "Stay you. Not be perfect. Not be strong. Just stay himself." Jungkook let out a shaky breath. "You remembered that?" he asked. "Of course I did." Jimin's smile was small but steady. "You think I forget things like that?" Jungkook felt something burning behind his eyes. He quickly blinked. The hallway felt warmer now, or maybe his chest was just too tight. "You're being weird, Hyung," he muttered quietly. "Maybe." Jimin shrugged. "But I wanted you to have it before the tour." "Why before?" Jimin looked toward the distant roar of fans. "Because once we start," he said, "everything moves too fast." He paused. Cities blur together, days disappear. You stop sleeping properly, you stop thinking properly. Jungkook nodded slowly. He knew that feeling. "Sometimes," Jimin continued, "you forget the small things that keep you grounded." His gaze returned to Jungkook. "And I didn't want that to happen to you." Jungkook stared at him. For years people had called him strong, talented, golden. But Jimin had always been the one who saw the quiet cracks underneath. "Hyung," Jungkook whispered. Jimin nudged the ring toward him. "Put it on." Jungkook hesitated for a second before sliding the silver band onto his finger. It fit perfectly. He looked up, confused. "How did you?" "I guessed." "You guessed my ring size exactly." Jimin grinned. "I pay attention." Jungkook laughed weakly. Then the laughter faded. Emotion rose again in his chest, heavier this time. "Why does this feel like goodbye?" he asked quietly. Jimin's expression softened. "It's not goodbye." "Then why do I feel like crying?" Jimin didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached forward and lightly flicked Jungkook's forehead. "You're emotional today." Jungkook rubbed his head. "You're the one giving mysterious rings before a world tour." Jimin chuckled. Then his voice softened again. "Listen to me." Jungkook looked up. "No matter how big things get out there," Jimin said, nodding toward the stadium, "you're still that kid from the dorm who steals blankets." Jungkook felt the tears finally slip free before he could stop them. He didn't wipe them away. Didn't speak. The ring felt cool against his skin. Jimin watched him quietly, not teasing, not rushing him. Just standing there like he always had. "Steady." After a long moment, Jungkook finally whispered, "Thank you." Jimin nodded once. Above them, the stadium lights burst fully to life. The concert was about to begin. Jungkook took one last breath and looked at the ring again. "Stay you." For the first time all day, his racing thoughts slowed. And when they stepped out of the shadowed hallway toward the blinding stage lights and the deafening roar of the crowd, Jungkook carried the small silver promise with him, silent, steady, and shining on his hand. The stadium lights exploded into white brilliance the moment Jungkook stepped onto the stage. The roar of 70,000 fans struck like a tidal wave. For a split second he froze, not from fear, but from the overwhelming rush of sound, heat, and movement. The air smelled like fireworks smoke and metal scaffolding warmed by lights. Cameras swung toward him like mechanical eyes, capturing every breath, every blink. And the ring. It glinted under the stage lights. Jungkook felt it immediately. A small weight on his finger. A quiet reminder. "Stay you." Jungkook. The chant thundered through the stadium. He inhaled sharply and lifted the microphone. "ACH," he shouted, voice echoing across the arena. The crowd screamed louder. Behind him, the music blasted through the speakers, bass vibrating through the stage floor. The other members rushed out one by one, their energy electric, their smiles wide and practiced, yet still real. But Jungkook barely noticed. His mind was still in that hallway, still holding Jimin's voice, still hearing the softness behind it. Throughout the opening performance, he moved like instinct had taken control. His body remembered every step of choreography, every turn and spin. Sweat formed along his hairline as the lights blazed hotter, the crowd louder. Yet every time he lifted his hand to gesture to fans, the silver ring flashed. And every time it did, his chest tightened again. Midway through the third song, he caught Jimin watching him. Not just casually. Watching closely. Jimin quickly looked away when their eyes met, spinning into the next move with his usual effortless grace. But Jungkook had already seen it. Something unsettled. Something restless. After 2 hours of explosive performances, the final fireworks burst above the stage. The last note of the encore faded into the roaring sea of voices. Jungkook stood at the front of the stage, breathing hard, chest rising and falling. The ring shimmered again as he waved. "Thank you," he shouted. The members gathered together for their closing bow, hands linked, shoulders touching. The crowd chanted their names like thunder rolling across mountains. But when Jungkook glanced sideways, he noticed Jimin wasn't smiling as brightly as usual. His smile was there, but thinner, and his eyes kept drifting toward Jungkook's hand. Backstage, after the show, was chaos. Managers shouting instructions. Staff rushing equipment down corridors. The smell of sweat, makeup remover, and hot electronics filled the dressing area. Jungkook collapsed into a chair, grabbing a water bottle. "Good show," Taehyung said, tossing a towel at him. "You nearly slipped during the second chorus," Hosok added with a grin. "I did not," Jungkook protested. "You absolutely did," Namjoon laughed. "I saw your life flash before your eyes." The room filled with laughter. But Jimin was quiet. He sat on the couch, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the floor. Jungkook noticed immediately. He stood up. "Hyung." Jimin looked up. "Yes. Come here." The others glanced between them, sensing something. "Hello," Yoongi muttered. "Private talk." Jimin sighed, but stood anyway, following Jungkook into the narrow hallway outside the dressing room. The door shut behind them. Silence fell instantly. Jungkook turned around. "Why are you acting strange?" "I'm not." "You are." Jimin folded his arms. "You're imagining things." Jungkook lifted his hand. The ring gleamed between them. "This isn't something people give casually," Jungkook said quietly. Jimin's gaze flickered. "You're overthinking it." "Am I?" Jungkook stepped closer. "Then tell me why you looked like you were about to say something all night." Jimin hesitated. For the first time that evening, his confident composure cracked. "That's because," he began, then stopped. Jungkook waited. "Because what?" Jimin rubbed the back of his neck. "Because I wasn't sure if I should have given it to you." Jungkook's eyebrows drew together. "What?" "I mean," Jimin continued quickly, "maybe the timing was weird. You gave me a ring, and now you're regretting it." "That's not what I said." "It sounds exactly like that." Jimin let out a frustrated breath. "You're twisting my words." "No," Jungkook shot back, voice rising. "I'm trying to understand you." Footsteps passed at the far end of the hallway, but neither of them noticed. The tension between them had thickened. Jimin finally met his eyes again. "Jungkook, do you trust me?" The question hit unexpectedly. "Of course I do." "Then stop interrogating me." Jungkook clenched his jaw. "You made me cry before the biggest tour of our lives, and you expect me not to ask questions." Jimin's eyes widened slightly. "You cried." Jungkook gestured at his face. "Did you think those were stage tears?" For a moment, Jimin looked genuinely stunned. Then something softened in his expression. "I didn't mean to make you cry." "I know." "Then why are you angry?" Jungkook hesitated. The anger wasn't simple. It was confusion, emotion, and something deeper he couldn't quite name. Because, he finally said, quieter now, that ring meant something to you. Jimin looked down. And you still won't tell me what? Silence stretched between them again. From inside the dressing room came bursts of laughter from the others. The normal world. But out here, the air felt heavier. Jimin spoke slowly. Do you remember the day we almost disbanded? Jungkook blinked. The memory slammed back like a door bursting open. Exhaustion. Arguments. Uncertainty. A moment when everything they built nearly collapsed. Yes, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin nodded. That day you said something else too. Jungkook frowned. What? You said if we ever lost each other, you wouldn't know who to be anymore. Jungkook looked away. I was emotional. But you meant it. Jungkook didn't answer. Jimin stepped closer. That ring isn't just about you remembering yourself, he said. Jungkook's eyes returned to him. Then what is it? Jimin's voice dropped to barely a whisper. It's so you don't forget me. The words landed like lightning. Jungkook stared at him. What? Jimin swallowed. I know the world tour will change things, he said. Schedules get crazier, people drift. Sometimes we barely see each other for weeks. That's normal. I know. Then why are you acting like? Because I've already watched people disappear from my life before, Jimin interrupted. The raw honesty in his voice stunned Jungkook. Jimin rarely spoke like that. Friends, Jimin continued quietly, people who promised they stay, and then one day they were just gone. Jungkook's anger faded instantly. I'm not them, he said. I know you're not. Jimin looked directly at the ring. But I needed something that made that promise real. Jungkook's chest tightened again. So you gave me a ring? Yes. That's insane. Jimin laughed softly. I never said it was. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair. You could have just told me. I am telling you. No, Jungkook said gently, you're finally telling me. Another silence. This one softer. Jungkook looked at the ring again. The engraving suddenly felt heavier. Stay you. And something else unspoken beneath it. You really thought I'd forget you? Jungkook asked. Jimin didn't answer immediately. Then he said quietly, fame changes people. Jungkook stepped forward. So remind me every day if you have to. Jimin looked up. You mean that? Jungkook lifted his hand. The ring caught the hallway light again. I'm wearing your reminder, our ice. For the first time all night, Jimin's smile reached his eyes. Warm. Relieved. But just as the tension began to dissolve, a voice echoed from down the hallway. Well, this is interesting. Both of them turned sharply. A woman stood near the corner, arms crossed. A journalist. Her phone was raised. Recording. Her smile was sharp. Fans are going to love this story, she said. Jungkook's stomach dropped. The ring flashed again under the cold hallway lights. The woman lowered her phone slowly, but the recording light was still blinking. Jungkook felt the air leave his lungs. For a moment, the hallway seemed to shrink around them. The distant noise of staff moving equipment sounded suddenly sharper, louder, like every step was closing in. Jimin's voice came first. Delete that. It wasn't loud, but it carried a calm edge that made the woman pause. She tilted her head slightly, examining them both like a scientist observing something rare. Why, she asked lightly, did I interrupt something important? Jungkook stepped forward instinctively. Turn it off. The journalist smiled, though her eyes were calculating. You know, she said, fans always speculate about relationships inside groups, but catching something like this on camera, that's a whole different level. Jimin's jaw tightened. You shouldn't be back here. Press access, she replied casually. Your management approved it. Jungkook could feel heat rising in his chest. What exactly did you record? The woman shrugged. Oh, just a very emotional conversation. She lifted the phone slightly. Something about rings, promises, not forgetting each other. Jungkook's pulse slammed in his ears. The silver band on his finger suddenly felt like it was glowing under a spotlight. This could trend worldwide in an hour, she added. Jimin stepped closer to her. His expression was calm again, but Jungkook knew that look. It was the same one Jimin had when something truly angered him. You're not publishing that. She laughed. That's not your decision. Actually, Jimin said quietly, it might be. Her smile thinned. You threatening me? No. Jimin folded his arms. I'm asking politely. The tension between them tightened like a wire ready to snap. Jungkook suddenly realized several staff members had stopped at the far end of the hallway, watching. If this turned into a scene, it would spread instantly. He took a breath. How much did you hear? He asked. The journalist turned her gaze to him. Enough. Her eyes dropped to the ring. That's quite a gift for bandmates. Jungkook's hand instinctively curled. It's none of your business. Everything public figures do is my business. Jimin spoke again, sharper now. You're twisting something personal into a scandal. That's literally my job. Jungkook clenched his jaw. What do you want? She raised an eyebrow. Straight to negotiation. Just answer. The woman studied him for a moment, as if measuring how far she could push. Then she said, an interview. Jimin scoffed. You already get those. Not like this. She gestured between them. I want the truth behind the ring. Silence dropped like a stone. Jungkook glanced at Jimin. Jimin's eyes were dark with frustration. You're unbelievable, he muttered. The journalist shrugged again. Or I release the clip. The blinking recording light felt like a ticking bomb. Jungkook's mind raced. If that video leaked without context, the internet would explode with theories. Rumors. Speculation. Pressure on the group. On Jimin. On him. Fine, Jungkook said suddenly. Jimin snapped his head toward him. Jungkook. I'll do the interview. The journalist's smile returned instantly. Smart choice. Jimin grabbed Jungkook's arm. What are you doing? Containing the damage. This isn't damage control, Jimin hissed. This is feeding her story. Then what's your plan? Jungkook shot back. Let it leak without explanation. Jimin didn't answer. Because he knew Jungkook was right. The journalist clapped her hands lightly. Perfect tomorrow morning. No, Jimin said firmly. Both of them looked at him. If this interview happens, Jimin continued, I'm there too. The woman tilted her head again. That might make things even more interesting. Jungkook sighed. Congratulations, you got your story. She smiled. Oh, I know. Then she finally tapped the screen, and the recording light disappeared. See you both tomorrow. She walked away down the hallway with confident steps, already typing something into her phone. Jungkook leaned back against the wall once she was gone. His heart was still racing. Well, he muttered. Jimin ran a hand through his hair. That was a disaster. Jungkook looked down at the ring again. Or maybe it's just the beginning. Jimin stared at him. Why did you agree so quickly? Jungkook shrugged tiredly. Because hiding things makes people more suspicious. Jimin shook his head. You don't understand how brutal media can be. I do. No, Jimin said quietly, you really don't. Jungkook looked up. What's that supposed to mean? Jimin hesitated. Then he said something that made Jungkook's stomach twist. She wasn't lying about one thing. Which thing? That video will go viral. Jungkook sighed. I figured. But that's not the real problem. Jungkook frowned. Then what is? Jimin's eyes dropped to the ring again. The real problem, he said softly, is what people will assume it means. Jungkook stared at him. And what if they assume the truth? Jimin's gaze snapped up. For a second, neither of them spoke. The hallway seemed to hold its breath again. Jungkook, Jimin began carefully. You're the one who gave it to me, Jungkook said. Yes. And you're the one who said you didn't want me to forget you. Yes. Then why are you suddenly scared of what people might think? Jimin opened his mouth, then closed it again. Jungkook stepped closer. You know what I think, he said quietly. Jimin's voice dropped to a whisper. What? I think you're not scared of the media. Jimin's heartbeat felt loud enough to echo. And what am I scared of? Jungkook held up his hand. The ring shone between them. You're scared they'll be right. Jimin's breath caught. For the first time that night, he had no immediate response. Because somewhere deep inside, a dangerous possibility had already crossed his mind long before the ring ever touched Jungkook's hand. The silence between them thickened so suddenly, it felt like the air itself had turned solid. Jimin didn't move. Jungkook could hear the distant rumble of equipment carts rolling across the concrete floors, the muffled voices of staff preparing for teardown, but inside the narrow hallway, everything felt suspended. You're scared they'll be right. The words still hung there. Jimin finally let out a slow breath. You shouldn't say things like that. Jungkook frowned. Why not? Because people might hear you. I'm not talking about people. Jungkook's voice dropped. I'm talking about you. Jimin rubbed his forehead like the conversation itself was giving him a headache. You're exhausted after the show, he said. We both are. This isn't the time for whatever this is. Jungkook's expression hardened. You gave me a ring 10 minutes before our biggest tour ever. Yes. You made a speech about not forgetting each other. Yes. And now you're pretending this is nothing. Jimin's voice sharpened. I never said it was nothing. Then what is it? Jimin looked away. The fluorescent light above them buzzed faintly. Jungkook's chest tightened with frustration. Hyung, look at me. Jimin didn't. Look at me, Jungkook repeated. Slowly, Jimin lifted his gaze. Jungkook spoke carefully now. When I said you're scared they might be right, you didn't deny it. Jimin's lips pressed together. Because, he said quietly, you're twisting things again. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. Then explain it. Jimin stepped back, running a hand through his hair. You want the truth? Yes. Fine. Jimin's eyes flashed with something raw. The truth is that if fans think there's something romantic happening between us, the consequences will be massive. Jungkook's voice remained steady. I know. Do you? Jimin shot back, because scandals destroy careers faster than talent builds them. That's not what I asked. Then what did you ask? Jungkook's jaw tightened. I asked what the ring means to you. Jimin went quiet again. For a long moment, the only sound was the distant hum of the stadium lights powering down. Finally, Jimin spoke. It means you matter to me. Jungkook stared at him. That's it. What do you want it to mean? Jungkook didn't answer immediately. Instead, he lifted his hand again, turning the silver band slowly under the light. You engraved words inside it. Yes. You remembered something I said years ago. Yes. You looked like you were about to cry when I put it on. Jimin exhaled sharply. You're overanalyzing every detail. Because every detail feels important. Jimin laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. You always do this. Do what? You push until people say things they shouldn't. Jungkook stepped closer again. Maybe people should just say them. Jimin's gaze hardened. And maybe some things are better left unsaid. Why? Because they complicate everything. Jungkook tilted his head slightly. Maybe everything is already complicated. Jimin opened his mouth, then stopped. Because the truth in that sentence landed too close to something he had been trying not to acknowledge for years. Jungkook watched him carefully. You know what the real problem is, Jungkook said. Jimin crossed his arms. What? You think the world tour is the thing that will change us? Jimin frowned. And you do. No. Jungkook's voice softened. I think we've been changing for a long time already. Jimin's eyes narrowed slightly. What does that mean? It means, Jungkook said slowly, we're not those trainees in the cold dorm anymore. No, we're not. So maybe we should stop pretending we feel the same way about everything as we did back then. Jimin's heartbeat began to pound harder. What are you trying to say? Jungkook hesitated for the first time. Then he said something that made Jimin's stomach drop. Why did you really give me the ring? Jimin blinked. I told you already. No, Jungkook replied. You gave me a safe version of the answer. Jimin scoffed. You're unbelievable. I'm serious. Jungkook stepped even closer until they were only a foot apart. If the reason was just nostalgia, he continued, you would have given it during practice, or at dinner, not in a dark hallway right before stepping on stage. Jimin's breathing slowed. Because Jungkook was right again. You picked that moment, Jungkook said quietly, because it mattered. Jimin looked down at the floor. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he asked softly, why are you doing this? Because I want honesty. You're asking questions you might not like the answers to. Try me. Jimin finally lifted his head again. The softness in his expression was gone. Now there was only vulnerability and frustration tangled together. You want honesty, he said. Yes. Fine. Jimin took one slow breath. The reason I gave you that ring tonight, he said quietly, is because I'm terrified this tour might change how you look at me. Jungkook frowned slightly. Why would it? Because the world is big, Jimin replied, and there will be thousands of new people around you every day, new friends, new influences, new distractions. Jungkook stared at him. You sound jealous. Jimin laughed bitterly. I'm not jealous. Then what? Jimin's voice dropped almost to a whisper. I'm scared. The admission hung in the air like fragile glass. Jungkook had rarely heard Jimin say those words. Scared of what? Jungkook asked softly. Jimin hesitated. Then he answered. Scared that one day you'll wake up and realize you don't need me in your life anymore. Jungkook blinked. The confession hit him harder than any accusation. That's ridiculous. Is it? Yes. Jimin's eyes searched his face. You're the most independent person I know now, he continued. You've grown into someone incredible, confident, strong. People gravitate toward you everywhere we go. And that makes you think I'll abandon you. Jimin shrugged slightly. People grow apart. Jungkook shook his head slowly. You're wrong. Am I? Yes. Jungkook lifted his hand again, the ring catching the light once more. You didn't give this to someone who's leaving. Jimin's voice was almost inaudible. How do you know? Jungkook stepped even closer. Because there was finally something he needed to say too. I know, Jungkook said quietly, because you're not the only one who's been scared. Jimin looked up sharply. What? Jungkook's heart was racing now. I've been scared too. Of what? Jungkook hesitated. Then he said the one thing he had never admitted before. Of losing you first. Jimin's eyes widened slightly. For a moment, neither of them moved. The hallway lights flickered again as another section of the stadium powered down, leaving them standing in softer shadows. And in that dim, quiet space, the meaning of the ring suddenly felt far more complicated than either of them had planned when the night began. The hallway had grown quieter as the stadium slowly emptied. Most of the crew had already left. The bright roar of the concert had faded into distant echoes and occasional metallic clanging as workers dismantled stage equipment. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered faintly, leaving long shadows stretching across the walls. Jungkook and Jimin were still standing there. Too close. Too silent. Jungkook's last words still lingered in the air between them. I've been scared too, of losing you first. Jimin stared at him as if he had just heard something impossible. You're joking, Jimin said finally. Jungkook shook his head slowly. I'm not. Jimin let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but it carried none of the usual warmth. That doesn't make any sense. Why not? Because, Jimin replied, rubbing the back of his neck, you're the one everyone depends on now. You're the center of everything. That's not true. It is. Jimin stepped away slightly, creating distance that felt suddenly uncomfortable. You have millions of fans screaming your name every night, he continued. Brands chasing you, producers begging to work with you. The entire industry sees you as unstoppable. Jungkook frowned. And that means I'll forget the people who were there from the start. Jimin didn't answer. Because part of him feared exactly that. Jungkook studied him carefully. You really believe that? Jimin shrugged, but his voice betrayed him. I've seen it happen. To whom? To everyone. Jungkook shook his head. You're projecting. Am I? Yes. Jungkook stepped forward again. You think the world will pull us apart because you're already preparing for it. Jimin's eyes narrowed slightly. You sound very confident about something you can't control. Jungkook's voice sharpened. And you sound like someone who already gave up. Jimin's head snapped up. I didn't give up. Then why do you keep talking like our friendship has an expiration date? Jimin's frustration finally broke through. Because nothing lasts forever. His voice echoed down the hallway. Both of them froze for a moment after the sudden outburst. Jimin exhaled slowly, lowering his voice again. You know that as well as I do. Jungkook looked down briefly. Yes, he said quietly, but that doesn't mean we stop fighting for the things that matter. Jimin laughed softly, but it sounded tired. You always see things in such simple terms. And you always complicate them. Another silence settled between them. Then Jungkook spoke again. You said earlier you were scared the tour would change how I look at you. Jimin nodded slightly. Yes. Why? Jimin hesitated. Then he said something that surprised even himself. Because lately, I don't even know how you look at me. Jungkook blinked. What does that mean? Jimin leaned back against the wall again, staring up at the ceiling. You've changed. So have you. Yes, Jimin said, but you changed faster. Jungkook frowned. That's not an answer. It's the truth. Jimin looked at him again, his voice quieter now. You used to tell me everything. And now I do. No. Jungkook opened his mouth to argue, but stopped. Because a part of him knew Jimin wasn't entirely wrong. There were things he had kept to himself lately. Thoughts, confusions, feelings he didn't fully understand yet. Jimin noticed the hesitation. See, he said softly, that doesn't mean I trust you less. Then what does it mean? Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. It means I'm still figuring things out. Figuring out what? Jungkook didn't answer. Jimin watched him carefully. You're hiding something. I'm not. You just paused for 10 seconds. Jungkook sighed. You're impossible. And you're avoiding the question. Jungkook leaned against the opposite wall, mirroring Jimin's posture. Fine, he said. You want honesty. Jimin nodded slowly. Yes. Jungkook looked down at the ring again. The silver band felt heavier now. I didn't just cry earlier because the ring reminded me of the past. Jimin's eyes sharpened. Then why? Jungkook swallowed. Because it confused me. Jimin frowned. Confused you how? Jungkook hesitated again. Then he spoke carefully. You've always been important to me. Yes. But tonight, the way you gave it to me. He trailed off. Jimin's heartbeat started picking up again. What about it? Jungkook lifted his gaze. It didn't feel like something you give a friend. The sentence hung there like a spark near gasoline. Jimin's breath caught. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Jungkook replied quickly. I'm telling you how it felt. Jimin looked away again. The tension between them had suddenly shifted into something much more dangerous. You're reading too much into it, he said quietly. Maybe. But you know how rumors work. I do. Then you understand why this conversation shouldn't exist. Jungkook frowned. So we're just going to pretend nothing happened. Jimin didn't answer. Jungkook's voice grew firmer. You gave me a ring, Jimin. Yes. People propose with rings. That's not what this was. Then explain what it was. Jimin's patience finally snapped. It was me being honest about how much you matter to me. His voice echoed again. But Jungkook didn't step back this time. Instead, he held Jimin's gaze. And if it's more than that? The question landed like thunder. Jimin froze. What? Jungkook's voice softened, but the words were unmistakable. What if the reason you're scared isn't the fans? He lifted his hand slightly, the ring catching the dim light once more. What if it's because you're scared of what this means too? Jimin's chest tightened painfully. For years, he had carefully avoided that thought. Buried it. Ignored it. But hearing it spoken out loud shattered the fragile barrier he had built. You shouldn't say things like that, Jimin whispered. Jungkook stepped closer again. Why? Because if someone hears you. I'm not talking about someone. Jungkook's voice dropped. I'm talking about us. Jimin felt his pulse pounding in his throat. You don't understand the consequences. Then explain them. Jimin stared at him, torn between fear and something much deeper he had never dared to confront. Finally, he said the one thing he had been holding back all night. If the world ever believed we felt that way about each other. His voice faltered. Everything could collapse. Jungkook studied him quietly. Then he said something that made Jimin's heart stop for a second. What if the world isn't the real problem? Jimin's eyes widened. What do you mean? Jungkook's voice was calm now. Steady. What if the real problem is that you've never asked me how I feel about it? The hallway fell completely silent. And for the first time since the ring touched Jungkook's hand, Jimin realized he might not be the only one standing on the edge of something terrifying and irreversible. For a long moment, Jimin simply stared at Jungkook, unable to speak. The hallway lights buzzed faintly overhead. Somewhere far down the corridor, a door slammed and the echo rolled through the empty stadium like distant thunder, but neither of them moved. What if the real problem is that you've never asked me how I feel about it? Jimin's mind raced, trying to catch up with the meaning behind those words. You're not serious, he said quietly. Jungkook didn't answer right away. His hand was still lifted slightly between them, the silver ring reflecting a dim streak of light across the wall. You think I would joke about something like this? Jungkook asked. Jimin swallowed. I think you're confused. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. And you're avoiding the question again. Jimin pushed himself off the wall and paced 2 steps down the hallway before stopping. He pressed his palms against his temples as if trying to physically hold his thoughts together. This is exactly why I didn't want to talk about it, he muttered. Because it's uncomfortable, Jungkook asked. Because it's dangerous. Jungkook laughed softly, but the sound was tense. Everything we do is dangerous. That's not the same. Jungkook crossed his arms. No, singing on stage in front of millions isn't dangerous. Living under constant cameras isn't dangerous. You know what I mean, Jimin snapped. Yes, Jungkook said quietly, I do. Jimin turned to face him again. His voice dropped, almost pleading. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking clearer than I have in years. Jimin scoffed. After one emotional night. This didn't start tonight. Jimin froze slightly. What are you talking about? Jungkook hesitated, then said something that made Jimin's chest tighten. You think the ring confused me, Jungkook said, but the truth is, I've been confused for a long time. Jimin's heart pounded harder. About what? Jungkook's voice grew quieter. About why I feel different around you. The words landed heavy between them. Jimin took a slow breath. You feel different around me because we've known each other for years, he said carefully. That's not it. Then what is it? Jungkook stepped closer again. You really want the answer? Jimin hesitated. Part of him wanted to say no. To stop this conversation before it crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. But another part of him needed to hear it. Yes, Jimin said finally. Jungkook studied his face for a moment. Then he spoke. Every time someone asks me what kind of person I want beside me in the future, I start describing you. Jimin blinked. What? I don't do it on purpose, Jungkook continued, but it happens. Jimin shook his head slowly. You're talking nonsense. Am I? Yes. Jungkook's expression tightened. You asked for honesty. Jimin looked away again. You're mixing admiration with something else. Maybe. But that doesn't make it less real. Jimin paced again, clearly unsettled now. You don't understand the weight of what you're suggesting. Jungkook's voice grew firmer. I understand it perfectly. Do you? Jimin said sharply, because if people heard this conversation, I know what would happen. Then why are you still saying it? Jungkook's eyes locked onto his. Because you started it. Jimin stared at him. What? You gave me a ring with words inside it that sound like a promise, Jungkook said. You told me you were afraid of losing me. You said you didn't want me to forget you. Jimin exhaled heavily. That's not the same thing. Maybe not. Jungkook lifted his hand again. But it felt like more. Jimin rubbed his face in frustration. You're twisting everything I said. No. Yes. No, Jungkook repeated calmly. I'm just refusing to pretend it meant nothing. Jimin dropped his hands and looked at him again. For the first time, his voice carried a hint of vulnerability he hadn't shown before. And what exactly do you think it meant? Jungkook hesitated. Then he said something that made Jimin's stomach drop. I think you gave it to me because you care about me more than you're willing to admit. Jimin laughed quietly, but it sounded hollow. Of course, I care about you. You know that's not what I meant. Jimin's voice sharpened again. You're pushing this conversation somewhere it shouldn't go. Maybe it should go there. Why? Because avoiding it doesn't make it disappear. Jimin stared at him, breathing slowly. You're playing with fire, he said. Jungkook shrugged. Maybe we've been standing in the fire for years. Jimin didn't reply. Instead, he asked quietly, what exactly are you saying you feel? Jungkook's heart hammered in his chest. The moment felt enormous. Dangerous. But he had already stepped too far back to retreat now. I don't fully understand it yet, Jungkook admitted. Jimin frowned. That's not an answer. It's the truth. Jungkook took another step closer. But I do know one thing. Jimin waited. Jungkook spoke slowly. When you said earlier that you were scared of losing me. Yes. The idea of losing you scared me even more. Jimin's breath caught again. The silence stretched. Then Jimin said quietly, you're going to ruin both of us if you keep talking like this. Jungkook tilted his head. Why? Because feelings like that don't stay private. Jungkook glanced down the empty hallway. No one's here. That's not the point. Then what is the point? Jimin's voice dropped to almost nothing. The point is that if we cross that line, there's no going back. Jungkook studied him carefully. And what if we already crossed it? Jimin's eyes widened slightly. What? Jungkook's voice softened again. You didn't hesitate when you gave me the ring. Jimin looked down at Jungkook's hand. The silver band gleamed under the fluorescent light. His chest tightened. Jungkook. Tell me honestly, Jungkook said. Jimin hesitated. Then Jungkook asked the one question Jimin had been dreading all night. When you gave me this, did you ever once think about what it might look like? Jimin didn't answer. Did you? Jimin's silence was answer enough. Jungkook's eyes softened. You did. Jimin finally whispered, yes. And you still gave it to me. Yes. Why? Jimin closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, there was no more pretending left. Because, he said quietly, a part of me wanted to. The confession landed between them like a spark in dry grass. And suddenly, the distance between them felt far more fragile than either of them had expected when the night began. Jimin's words lingered in the air long after he said them. Because a part of me wanted to. The confession felt heavier than the ring on Jungkook's finger. For several seconds, neither of them moved. The hallway had grown even quieter, as if the entire building were holding its breath around them. Somewhere above, the last of the stadium lights were being shut down one row at a time, dimming the world outside their narrow corridor. Jungkook stared at Jimin. "You wanted to," he repeated slowly. Jimin rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly restless. "That's not the same as meaning it the way you're interpreting it." Jungkook didn't look convinced. "Then what way did you mean it?" Jimin sighed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Then make it simple." Jimin laughed under his breath. "Nothing about this is simple." Jungkook stepped closer again. Their distance had shrunk to barely a foot now. "Why not?" Jungkook asked quietly. Jimin hesitated. Then he said something sharp. "Because if you keep looking at me like that, I might forget why this is a terrible idea." Jungkook blinked. "What does that mean?" Jimin shook his head quickly. "Nothing." That didn't sound like nothing. It was. Jungkook's voice hardened slightly. "You just admitted a part of you wanted to give me the ring, knowing what it could mean." Jimin looked away again. "Yes. And now you're pretending that thought didn't exist." "I'm not pretending." "Then explain it." Jimin exhaled heavily. "Fine." He leaned back against the wall again, arms folded tightly across his chest, as if bracing himself. "You want the truth, the real truth." "Yes. The real truth is that sometimes feelings exist that shouldn't." Jungkook frowned. "That's vague." "It's honest." Jungkook tilted his head slightly. "You're saying you feel something you think you shouldn't." Jimin didn't reply, but his silence spoke loudly. Jungkook felt his pulse quicken again. "Why shouldn't you?" Jimin let out a short laugh. "Seriously?" "Yes." "You want me to list the reasons?" "Go ahead." Jimin pushed off the wall again, suddenly packing. "We're in the same group. Our lives are broadcast to millions of people. Every step we take becomes headlines." "I know that." "And you think fans, media, and the entire industry would react calmly if rumors like that became real?" Jungkook shrugged slightly. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." Jungkook didn't answer. Jimin continued, his voice rising with frustration. "Contracts, reputation, the team, everything we built together could be dragged into controversy overnight." Jungkook crossed his arms. "So your solution is to pretend feelings don't exist?" "My solution is to protect what we have." "What do we have?" Jimin stopped packing. He looked at Jungkook like the question itself was ridiculous. "We have everything," he said quietly. Jungkook's voice softened. "Then why are you so afraid of losing it?" Jimin didn't answer. Because that question cut straight through his carefully built defenses. Jungkook watched him closely. "You're scared the world will take it away." "Yes. But what if the world doesn't get to decide that?" Jimin shook his head slowly. "You're being naive." "Maybe." Jungkook stepped closer again. "But I'd rather be naive than live like a coward." Jimin's eyes flashed. "You think I'm a coward?" "I think you're scared." "And you're not." Jungkook hesitated. Then he said quietly, "Of course I am." Jimin stared at him. "Then why push this conversation?" "Because I'd rather face something scary than ignore it forever." Jimin ran a hand through his hair again. "You always do this." "Do what?" "You jump straight into emotional chaos without thinking about the consequences." Jungkook smirked slightly. "You gave me a ring 10 minutes before performing in front of 70,000 people. Jimin opened his mouth, then closed it again. Fair point, he muttered. The tension between them shifted slightly, but the underlying storm remained. Jungkook lifted his hand again. The ring glimmered faintly. You said earlier the reason you gave this to me was because you were scared I'd forget you. Yes, but that wasn't the only reason. Jimin hesitated. No. Jungkook took another step closer. So tell me the other reason. Jimin looked directly into his eyes. The vulnerability there made Jungkook's chest tighten. You really want to know? Yes. Jimin swallowed slowly. The other reason, he said, is because sometimes when I look at you, I don't feel like I'm looking at just a friend anymore. The words fell into the quiet hallway like a confession whispered into darkness. Jungkook's heart skipped. Jimin immediately looked away after saying it, almost as if the admission itself burned. That's exactly why this conversation shouldn't exist, he added quickly. Jungkook didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared at the ring again. Then back at Jimin. You realize something, right? Jungkook said softly. Jimin frowned slightly. What? You just confirmed everything I was trying to figure out. Jimin groaned quietly. I shouldn't have said that. But you did. And now I regret it. Why? Jimin's voice dropped again. Because now you're going to overthink it even more. Jungkook's lips curved faintly. Too late. Jimin leaned his head back against the wall. You're impossible. And you're honest when you're cornered. Jimin looked at him again. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Jungkook shrugged. A little. That's cruel. Maybe. Then Jungkook's expression softened again. But I'm also relieved. Jimin blinked. Relieved. Yes. Why? Jungkook's voice lowered. Because now I know I wasn't imagining it. Jimin's stomach tightened. Imagining what? Jungkook hesitated. Then he said quietly, the way you look at me sometimes. Jimin froze. What do you mean? You think I didn't notice? Jimin's voice came out almost defensive. Notice what? Jungkook stepped even closer. Now there were only inches between them. Sometimes when we're on stage, Jungkook said softly, or during rehearsals, I catch you staring. Jimin's pulse jumped. That's normal. No. Jungkook's voice dropped further. Not the way you do it. Jimin tried to laugh it off. You're imagining things. Jungkook shook his head. You just admitted you sometimes don't see me as just a friend. Jimin had no response ready for that. The hallway fell silent again. Jungkook studied his face carefully. Then he asked one final question that made Jimin's heart slam painfully against his ribs. When you look at me like that, are you thinking the same things I am? Jimin's breath caught. Because for the first time all night, he realized the conversation had reached a place where the next answer might change everything between them forever. Jimin didn't answer. Not because he didn't have one, but because the answer felt like a door that, once opened, would never close again. The hallway was dim now. Most of the stadium power had been shut down, leaving only emergency lights glowing along the walls. The faint hum of ventilation echoed through the empty building, and the distant sounds of trucks loading equipment outside rumbled like a storm far away. Jungkook was still standing inches from him. Too close. Close enough that Jimin could see the slight tremble in Jungkook's breathing. When you look at me like that, are you thinking the same things I am? Jimin swallowed. You shouldn't ask questions you're not ready to hear the answers to. Jungkook didn't move. I am ready. No, Jimin said quietly, you think you are. Jungkook's eyes hardened slightly. You're doing it again. Doing what? Hiding behind warnings instead of honesty. Jimin sighed slowly. You don't understand what honesty could do right now. Jungkook's voice dropped. Then explain it to me. Jimin ran a hand through his hair again, packing a few steps down the hallway before stopping. Honesty might destroy everything we've built. Jungkook watched him carefully. Or it might stop us from pretending. Jimin turned back. You really think this is pretending? Yes. Jimin scoffed. You're unbelievable. And you're terrified. Jimin laughed under his breath. Of course I'm terrified. Jungkook's expression softened slightly. Then stop pretending you're not. Jimin leaned against the wall again, staring at the floor. You want the truth? Yes. Jimin hesitated. Then he said quietly, yes. Jungkook blinked. Yes, what? Jimin looked up slowly. Yes, sometimes when I look at you, I think the same things you probably do. The words were quiet, but they struck harder than any shout. Jungkook's chest tightened. The silence between them stretched. Jimin continued before Jungkook could speak. And every time it happens, I tell myself to stop. Jungkook's voice was barely audible. Why? Jimin laughed softly. You seriously need to ask. Yes. Jimin gestured around them. This world we live in isn't forgiving. Jungkook crossed his arms. Maybe it doesn't get to decide everything. Maybe it does. No. Jimin's eyes narrowed slightly. You're being reckless. Or honest. Jimin shook his head. You're underestimating the consequences. And you're overestimating how much control we actually have. Jimin looked frustrated again. You're acting like feelings alone are enough. They're a start. They're a disaster waiting to happen. Jungkook stepped closer again. We haven't even done anything. That's exactly why we should stop now. Jungkook raised an eyebrow. Stop what? This conversation. No. Yes. No, Jungkook repeated firmly. Jimin sighed heavily. Why are you pushing this so hard? Jungkook looked down at the ring. Then back at Jimin. Because you started it. Jimin groaned. We've already been over that. And you still haven't answered the most important question. Jimin frowned. What question? Jungkook lifted his hand again. The silver ring gleamed faintly in the emergency light. When you gave me this, were you hoping I might feel the same way? Jimin froze. The question pierced straight through every defense he had left. For a moment, he didn't breathe. Jungkook watched his face carefully. You were, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin finally spoke. Maybe. Jungkook's heartbeat jumped. Maybe. Jimin looked away again. I didn't expect anything. That's not what I asked. Jimin exhaled slowly. Fine. He met Jungkook's eyes again. A part of me hoped. The confession felt dangerous. Jungkook didn't look shocked. If anything, he looked calmer. That's what I thought. Jimin frowned. You're taking this surprisingly well. Jungkook shrugged slightly. Because I've been wondering the same thing. Jimin blinked. What? For a long time, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin's chest tightened. You're serious? Yes. Jimin stared at him, searching his face for any hint of hesitation. But Jungkook looked steady. Certain. How long? Jimin asked. Jungkook thought for a moment. I don't know exactly. Try. Jungkook leaned back against the opposite wall. Maybe a year. Jimin's eyes widened slightly. A year. Maybe longer. Jimin rubbed his face again. That's insane. Jungkook smirked faintly. Welcome to the conversation. Jimin paced again, clearly overwhelmed now. You should have said something earlier. Jungkook raised an eyebrow. You just spent the last hour explaining why we shouldn't even be having this conversation. Well, Jimin stopped packing. The tension between them had shifted into something new. Something fragile. So what now? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook shrugged. I don't know. That's comforting. I'm being honest. Jimin leaned against the wall again. You realize this is exactly the situation I was trying to avoid. Yes. And you walked straight into it. Yes. Jimin looked at him carefully. Why? Jungkook hesitated. Then he said something simple that made Jimin's heart ache. Because you matter too much to lie to. Jimin looked away again. For the first time all night, the silence between them wasn't tense. It was heavy. Real. Finally, Jimin spoke. If we take even one step further, everything changes. Jungkook nodded. I know. Fans will talk. I know. The media will hunt for clues. I know. Our company might panic. I know. Jimin stuttered him. And you're still standing here. Jungkook smiled faintly. You're still standing here too. Jimin laughed quietly. Touché. The air between them softened for a moment. Then Jungkook asked the question that shifted the night once again. So tell me honestly. Jimin looked up. What? Jungkook's voice dropped. If none of those consequences existed, if the world wasn't watching. He lifted his hand again, the ring glinting faintly. Would you still have given this to me? Jimin didn't hesitate this time. Yes. The answer came instantly. And it was the most honest thing he had said all night. Jungkook felt his chest tighten again. Because that single word carried more meaning than any of the arguments that came before it. And suddenly, the ring on his finger felt less like a reminder, and more like the beginning of something neither of them could easily walk away from anymore. The word yes lingered between them like something alive. Jungkook felt it settle deep in his chest, heavier than the ring resting on his finger. For the first time that night, neither of them rushed to fill the silence. Jimin's answer had come too quickly to be taken back. And Jungkook had heard the honesty in it. The emergency lights hummed faintly overhead, casting long shadows across the narrow corridor. Outside, trucks rumbled as stage equipment was loaded piece by piece, the distant clanging echoing through the empty stadium like fading thunder. Jungkook looked down at the silver ring again. Then back at Jimin. You didn't even hesitate, he said quietly. Jimin gave a tired half-smile. You asked a direct question. And you gave a very dangerous answer. Jimin sighed. Most of tonight has been dangerous. Jungkook leaned against the wall, studying him carefully. You know what surprises me? What? You keep warning me about consequences, but you're still here talking to me. Jimin folded his arms. That's because walking away now would feel worse. Jungkook's eyebrows lifted slightly. Worse? Jimin nodded. Yes. Jungkook tilted his head. That sounds like an admission. Jimin groaned softly. You're enjoying this way too much. I'm not enjoying it, Jungkook replied calmly. I'm just finally hearing things you've been hiding. Jimin's eyes narrowed. I wasn't hiding them. You absolutely were. I was protecting both of us. Jungkook's voice softened. From what? Jimin looked directly at him. From exactly what's happening right now. Jungkook lifted his hand again. The ring caught the dim light, sending a thin flash across the wall. And what exactly is happening right now? Jimin hesitated. Then he said quietly, lines are being crossed. Jungkook shrugged. Maybe those lines were never real. Jimin let out a short laugh. They're very real. Only because we believe they are. Jimin rubbed his forehead again. You're impossible. And you're dramatic. Jimin pointed toward the ring. You're wearing the evidence of this entire disaster on your hand. Jungkook glanced at it again. I'm not taking it off. I didn't ask you to. But you're thinking about it. Jimin looked away. That silence was answer enough. Jungkook noticed immediately. You were thinking about asking me to take it off. Jimin exhaled slowly. Because it complicates things. Or because it reveals something. Jimin didn't reply. Jungkook pushed off the wall and stepped closer again. You know what I think. Jimin sighed. I'm sure you're about to tell me. I think you gave me the ring hoping I'd understand something without you having to say it. Jimin crossed his arms tighter. That's not how communication works. It worked tonight. Jimin shook his head. No, tonight turned into chaos. Maybe chaos was necessary. Jimin looked at him like he had just suggested setting the building on fire. You're unbelievable. Jungkook smiled faintly. You've said that 3 times tonight. Because it keeps being true. The tension between them simmered quietly again. Then Jimin said something softer. You realize something though. Jungkook raised an eyebrow. What? This conversation doesn't erase the world outside this hallway. I know. Tomorrow morning we still have rehearsals. I know. And an interview with that journalist. Jungkook groaned. Right. Jimin watched his reaction carefully. She's going to ask about the ring. I figured. And about whatever she overheard. Jungkook rubbed his neck. That part worries me. Jimin nodded slowly. It should. Jungkook looked at him. So what do we say? Jimin thought for a moment. The safe answer. Jungkook frowned. Which is? That it's just a friendship ring. Jungkook stared at him. That's not entirely a lie. Jimin gave a small, tired smile. It's the closest thing to the truth the public can handle. Jungkook leaned back against the wall again. You're really good at compartmentalizing. Jimin shrugged. It's survival. Jungkook studied him quietly. Does it get exhausting? Jimin laughed softly. You have no idea. The air softened for a moment. Then Jungkook said something unexpected. You know, if this were a movie, this would be the moment where one of us does something reckless. Jimin's eyes narrowed slightly. Don't even think about it. Jungkook grinned. You're already suspicious. Because I know you. Jungkook stepped closer again. Their distance shrank once more. Relax, Jungkook said. I'm not about to destroy our careers in an empty hallway. Good. But, Jimin groaned. There's always a but with you. But I am curious about something. Jimin sighed. What now? Jungkook's voice lowered slightly. You said earlier that sometimes when you look at me, you don't feel like you're looking at just a friend. Jimin stiffened. We already talked about that. Yes. So why bring it up again? Because you never explained what that feels like. Jimin looked away again. You're asking very personal questions. You already crossed that line tonight. Jimin let out a long breath. It feels complicated. That's vague. Jimin gave him a look. You want poetry now. I want honesty. Jimin thought for a moment. Then he said quietly, sometimes it feels like my brain and my instincts are arguing with each other. Jungkook tilted his head. Explain. My brain says you're my teammate, my friend, someone I've known for years. And your instincts. Jimin hesitated. Then he said softly, my instincts forget that sometimes. Jungkook felt his heartbeat speed up again. Forget it how? Jimin's voice dropped almost to a whisper. They notice things they shouldn't. Jungkook didn't look away. Like what? Jimin hesitated again. Then he admitted something that made Jungkook's pulse jump. The way you look when you're laughing. Jungkook blinked. That's specific. I told you this conversation was dangerous. Jungkook smiled faintly. Continue. Jimin rolled his eyes. You're impossible. But you're still talking. Jimin looked at him for a long moment. Then he said quietly, the way you focus when you're performing. Jungkook didn't interrupt. And sometimes, Jimin continued, the way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. Jungkook's smile faded slightly. You notice that? Jimin scoffed. You're not subtle. Jungkook rubbed the back of his neck. Well. Then the air between them shifted again. Because Jimin suddenly asked something in return. My turn. Jungkook blinked. Your turn. Yes. You're interrogating me now. Absolutely. Jungkook crossed his arms. Go ahead. Jimin's voice lowered. When you said earlier that you might feel the same things, what exactly were you talking about? Jungkook's confidence faltered slightly. For the first time that night, he looked unsure. Jimin noticed immediately. See, he said softly, it's not so easy when the question comes back to you. Jungkook laughed nervously. Maybe not. Jimin waited patiently. Well, he asked. Jungkook hesitated. Then he looked down at the ring again. You remember when you said you were scared I'd wake up one day and realize I didn't need you anymore? Yes. Jungkook looked back at him. I'm scared of the opposite. Jimin frowned slightly. The opposite? Yes. What do you mean? Jungkook's voice dropped. I'm scared I might realize I need you more than I should. The confession settled into the quiet hallway like a stone dropped into deep water. Jimin didn't speak. Because suddenly, the weight of the night felt heavier than either of them had expected when the concert began. And somewhere outside the building, the first faint light of morning was beginning to rise, bringing with it a new day that would force them both to face everything they had just admitted to each other.